Hello and welcome to Eye Openers. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. If it were not for you, I guess I would kind of just be talking to myself with my friend Chris here. So it's so good to have you. And without you guys, we wouldn't be having the eye-opening experiences, the insights that we want to create through these conversations to change the way that you show up as a leader and as a business owner. So welcome to today's show. I have Chris Furgis with me today. Thanks so much for joining me, Chris. How are you doing?
Very good. Thanks for having me.
So you know that no eye openers would ever happen without some eye-opening beverage of choice. At least that's my opinion. And caffeine has been fueling my eye-opening experiences for decades now. What are you drinking, Chris?
This is a Venti Breve sugar-free vanilla latte. So that's my creative Starbucks
All
drink of
right.
choice.
Latte. So we don't get that a lot. So I mean, you've got to go out and get your latte. Do you ever make lattes at home?
And it takes too long.
Takes too long. Quicker to just go find the nearest
Yeah,
Starbucks and
yeah.
have
The
them.
$9 coffee always works a lot better.
$9. It's true, right? And they're slowly getting there. Um, well,
That's,
for me, I try to just have it as simple as possible. Have you ever heard of bulletproof coffee?
yeah, I have.
For my listeners, they've definitely heard me talk about this before, but I love my bulletproof coffee. I don't know if it's placebo effect or real, but I definitely feel like the MCT oils and whatnot really help drive my focus in the morning. Could just be the coffee, but
That's
I feel
good.
like the added benefits of the bulletproof ingredients definitely help get me focused and moving forward in the morning. So we're not just here for coffee, though. I'm sorry to disappoint anybody who was just here to talk about the coffee. But we're here to really talk about your experience as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, and share some of those insights. So give us like a bulleted, brief background bio of who you are and why the audience members should even be listening.
Okay, so real brief bio. So I grew up, my dad was an entrepreneur, right?
Mhm.
Started a bank and a laundry business and dry cleaning business and factory back east with
Wow,
Ford Motor Company. So we did a lot of these things. So it was
cool.
always in the blood, to go out on my own. So I never really had a choice. Like I could have gone I was at IBM, when I started, I could have stayed there, but my destiny was, from the time I was 2, I was told you have to go start your own business. So anyway,
Wow.
so I went to undergrad, University of Utah in industrial and mechanical engineering, and then went
Mhm.
directly to UCLA graduate school in business, where I studied finance and marketing. And then right from there, I went to the fun IBM training program and became a sales rep for Big Blue. So I went
Amazing.
from,
And to give people some frame of reference, this is like early 90s.
oh yeah, this is, you don't even want to know. This is 83 to 85
Okay, when you're at
graduate school, and then IBM 85 to 91.
okay,
So I went from,
days when the company wasn't as huge as it is now, so you were, like, the experience you had is different versus if you worked at IBM in,
oh
like,
yeah,
the
when I went to IBM, I hit the peak. So the mid-year meeting was at the Ritz Carlton, right, in Marina Del Rey. Now, a year later, because we hit a big drop off, the mid-year meeting was at the Moose Lodge. So that's what happened. That's what happens in corporate America. So I went from wearing sweats and t-shirts to blue suits and white ties and suit every day for 6 years.
Mhm.
But while I was at UCLA, I met my partner in the graduate dorms, and he was getting his PhD in electrical engineering. We said, if we ever get a chance, we're going to start a business. So just one day we woke up and said, it's time. So that's where we started. And our
That's
first
amazing.
customer, we started out as a system integrator before we did the software.
Mhm.
And people have heard of this company. Our very first client was Ticketmaster. Can you believe it? We were there so they came to us. We put a whole little network together in a whole package. And then from that, we evolved into software because we were doing hardware integration, but you'd
And
have
that's
to
what you
spend,
did at Ticketmaster.
Yeah, and what would happen is you'd
Walk
have to.
me through, Chris, because this it might be jogging your memory a bit, but I think I know my audience, and I think this is something that they would want to know. And I'm also always encouraging people to send in their questions who are watching live. Um, how do you go out and get a client like Ticketmaster?
Well, that was just we would just phone and call. This is because we were early on and just hit the doors. But this was
So
really
this is
early though.
good. Like, yeah, this is what I'm encouraging people to think about is that I think nowadays, because there's like so much tech and like that we have access to, we forget that the easiest thing to do is like pick up the phone and call and
That's
ask
it.
for the
That's it.
business, right?
Yeah.
But so many people don't do that anymore that I think it's important to remember that if you want something, sometimes you just have to ask for it.
Oh yeah. And what's interesting is what happened to us is so we started getting these deals where we would integrate and put computer systems together. But the
Mhm.
problem was as a startup, right? You'd have to outlay all this money, right? Because it's hardware, right? And before you got paid, right? You didn't get paid for a while, so you were just being choked off with the really
Mhm.
bad cash flow. And that's the problem with the hardware business. You have to spend all this money, and then the client doesn't pay you for a while, right? So you can have 3, 4 months where you're like, you need more capital. So
Yeah,
it's
carry that.
way too capital intensive. And
Okay.
that's when we said, we gotta go the software route. And so we came up with this idea. We said, people really have a hard time doing mail merge in Word, right? So let's come up with an easy way to do mail merge, right? Because
Mhm.
we were getting a lot of calls and questions for that. We did that. And what happened was
This is
that
the 90s. Yeah.
90s, we integrated to a product called PackRat. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
Mm-mm.
That was probably the second personal information manager, CRM, ever for Windows. And
Wow.
we integrated to that. And then funny story, and this is an entrepreneurial story. He was PCM Magazine's editor's choice. He was doing great. We used them as the back end database. And one of
Mhm.
our friends now who made like millions selling mouse pads went to visit him to sell him mouse pads. And while he was in there, he got a phone call from his distributor saying all the software has to come back because there's problems with it. So he was there when that whole thing imploded. So from there on, we had to develop our own database. And that's where we came up with our own address book. And the rest is history. It became Office Accelerator, one of the best selling address books in the early
You
90s for
guys
Windows.
compiled data and sold it
Yes.
to organizations. Like, okay.
Yeah. So then we came up with this. We were one of the first, probably one of the first 5 address books for Windows. So we were there when Windows started because when we were at the conference, it was Windows and OS2 conference, and they were both equal. But OS2 was $900 and Windows was 99. So you figure out which one took off.
Yeah, yeah, incredible. It's so great to hear these stories about what tech was like in the 90s and what, who was there and how different the landscape kind of was than the way we are seeing business today. But
Can
you
you
guys
hear
have
me?
been through it all, which is incredible.
Now, this is honest truth. If you go back, I mean, it's so random. I bet the guys that started out and the people we knew out of all the couple hundred guys, I bet there's 5 or 6 billionaires in there. That's how early we are. So we're not one of those, but we know them because it happened. We were there when
Yeah,
all this stuff just exploded.
it's
So
incredible.
yeah, it's like when we were at IBM, we'd get phone calls to go work at Microsoft. So the
Mm,
people that were doing terrible would leave because they weren't doing well. They'd go to
yeah,
Microsoft 10 years later, they're all worth 20 million bucks because of the stock options. That was new back then.
right, right. So what are you guys up to now?
Oh,
Fast forward
now,
to
yeah,
2022.
now, so
What are you up
32 years later, we're still going strong.
to? That's
And
a huge achievement. I just want to
yeah,
stop this. I mean, 32 years at anything is real market acceptance. And like you guys have made it through several economic
oh
downturns. This
God,
is incredible.
we've seen it all. And things happen. Like when 9/11 happened, our sales dried up for like 5 months. We had customers, that were in those twin towers and stuff and all over. So it just, and the whole country stopped buying anything. So, I mean, we've gone through a lot of those. So you have to just pivot a lot as an entrepreneur or you won't survive. Because you'll notice with a lot of these companies, like even Google or Microsoft, they get a very core competency that it's really hard to do something else. Like other than search engines, Google has, they've tried 100 different things. They've never got anything to fly. So one of the things as an entrepreneur, once you find out what you're good at, and you teach this in your consulting and in your videos, you say you got to like find out what you're great at and just stay there. And that's what it's because it's very hard to switch out of that and do something else.
Right, right. So you're saying that you learned this from me.
Well, yeah, well, no, it's what you teach, and that's the truth. You got to stay in that, or you won't. It's too competitive if you don't. You have to find out what you do really well and exploit that part of your skill set and kind of stay with.
You enjoy doing,
Yeah, you have to. That's the other part of it. Yeah, you got to like it, otherwise, you're not really working if you like your job.
Right. But what I also hear you saying is, embracing the pivot, that's a natural part of being an entrepreneur and running a business, that economic forces or whatever may be on you and you may need to pivot. So tell us about your latest pivot and what you guys are up to.
Well, we started, this is kind of interesting. So the pivots we went through would be one, we were an integrator, right? So we didn't do any software. And then we turned into a software package that used somebody else's database, right? Then we pivoted into our own shrink wrap software package. And then after we did that for a while, we pivoted into licensing. So we went from selling in retail to selling to larger companies, and they sold thousands of copies, and we made a small percentage of that, but very lucrative because you don't have any of the development or the work that you have to put in.
Yeah.
And then we pivoted, we got into high-end CRM for law firms. And then we pivoted again, more recently, we're going for small business prospect management. So if you look, we've pivoted like 5 or 6 times where we've done a totally kind of new business model. And at one point, we even created a product for the BlackBerry. We did a BlackBerry sync for Outlook. We sold a lot of those, and that was another product we did. So we kind of pivoted into that little area for about 2 years until the BlackBerry became a dinosaur. So that's the other thing in high tech. Your big product streams, you can watch them just before your eyes. The iPhone comes out, we're doing fine with the BlackBerry sync. Verizon does not offer the iPhone for whatever reason for about 2 years. And the day they offered the iPhone, right? Goodbye BlackBerry, wiped them out in about 6 months. So that's the other thing. You got to be really careful.
Right. Careful, or you have to really just be constantly looking at these trends and opportunities and what direction things are going, because it sounds like if you stay still too long, that's a death wish in tech.
But here's something interesting. Microsoft Word, if you look at it 31 years ago, right? And they still sell it. It's almost the exact same product. It hasn't changed much. Think about it. You could still change the fonts. Everything's basically the same 30 years later. So a lot of technology hangs around for a while too. So
okay, I like that point.
Yeah. So what happens if users learn your stuff, they like it, and they get all their data in it, then it's hard for them to switch. So that's where you get away with, you don't have to pivot as much because they don't want, the switching costs are too high.
So if we're talking about your latest kind of focus on prospecting for small business owners.
Yes.
Give us an idea of where you'd like to be 3 years from now. So if I was to call you up and say, "Oh, Chris, it's so great to speak with you. I want to hear about, what have you achieved in the past 3 years that you're so excited to tell me about?"
So I would say we want to be at least 5 to 10 times bigger than we are now. So we're at a stage now where our kids are grown, and we don't have to do the little league and drive them around and take and play. You know what I mean? So we were good parents, and now we got more time on our hands where we can go more focused. So we're thinking maybe try to take this thing to the next level now. So we're at that point now where it's time to, increase the sales rapidly and, look for exit strategies as we
I
get
love
older.
hearing this. Like, I love hearing this because I feel like people are in such a rush. They like it. Their finish line is they're so short sighted.
No,
Where
they're,
you guys hear this from himself 30 years later. Now it's time. Chris is
yeah,
going to get
now,
focused.
yeah, and
He's
our
going to
kids
get
are all,
focused now.
yeah, so our kids ended up all great kids, no real big problems. They all got, they're getting college degrees and doing well academically, and they're happy. And so you just go to the next thing. So we're going to be like Colonel Sanders and Ray Kroc. So we'll shoot the moon in our late, our early 60s.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, I
I think
don't. Yeah,
it's so important because I feel people experience so much pressure and they feel like they got to get it figured out by the time they're 30 or whatever. But these timelines are arbitrary and they're kind of ridiculous. And I think when you put too much pressure on yourself in that way, you actually lose out on maybe opportunities that are right in front of you because you have tunnel vision. You can't
exactly.
see what else is actually available to you, or you're trying to I say this a lot with clients. You got to slow down to speed
There's no
up.
rush.
Like Reid Hoffman says, do something that doesn't scale before you do something that does. You'll get so good at building that product or creating an area of expertise that they can't ignore you. Like really building out that zone of genius to build your product or create your service, and then focus on that scalability. And it sounds like that's the way that you guys have gone.
Yeah, because you don't. I mean, there's no like. I don't know, there's no finish line that you have to get there at a certain time, right? And people think that way. As long as you're having fun along the way and you're not starving to death and you can live a decent life, a good lifestyle, right? To that next level is different, right? But there's really no rush to it. And unless you're, a lot of people like to be done with, work when they're like 60 or 65. That's just
Right.
how they're wired. But the way I'm wired, I don't know what I would do, after. I don't know how much golf and you know trips to the beach, you can make. You know what I'm saying?
It's a good point. Some of my, I mean, I have the privilege of working with a lot of successful business people, and some of the most unsatisfied or unhappy people I've met are those that have had a really difficult transition into retirement. Because when you're running an organization or are in a leadership role in some way, you have a lot of purpose, a lot of direction, and you
Right,
have a lot of community.
right.
And people don't think about how much work really serves them and is such a big part of their life until they step away from it. And you can't go from being so central, in those type of roles to
And
then,
then nothing.
yeah,
That's
right.
hard.
Yeah, it's challenging. Some people love it; they do it really well. But for other people, it's not as smooth. And I've seen a lot of people really fall into a depression.
And I think you have to know yourself. You know what I mean?
Mm.
You know, and if it's fun, we're still creating new stuff every day. And creativity is one of the funnest parts of the
Yeah.
entrepreneurial job. So
Well, so
we
how
want,
do you stay motivated, right? So like, excuse me, I've only been at this 10 years,
yeah,
and so you've got lots of years on me. And how do you continue to come back to it and think about like, okay, in front of us in the next 3 years, we're looking at scaling 5 to 10
yeah.
times. Um, you know, how what drives you to stay focused on that problem and keep coming back to it to innovate.
Well, I think number one, you have to like the customers, right? So it's the relationship you have with them. You got to like people and that, and serving the customer, right? So
Mhm.
that's like the number one thing. So you got to like that when you come in every day, making them happy, right? So that's the
Mhm.
number one. And number two, you got to like the process of the creativity of switching, of changing, and coming up with stuff out of thin air, just to put food on the table. You got to love that. And so that catalyst, that thing, that motivation's there. So that's the fun part. So that's what keeps you going. It's the fact you can create, and the fact you can interact with the clients, and it's fun. It's so challenging. Like it's and then this is being honest. There's nothing harder, and you probably know, and starting something from nothing, like just with a thought, and turning it into something of extreme value. It's 100 times harder than if you go to like a law firm or accounting firm and just do what you're supposed to do and then work your way up. That's a much faster way to make it a lot of money. This
Mhm.
there, the entrepreneurial, route is. And again, I've had the hardest math classes you're ever going to have, and I've done a lot of difficult things. There is nothing harder than to get someone to pull their wallet out and buy this thing you created from a thought out of nothing, and get them to pay you for it, whether
Mhm.
it's consulting services or a software product, Tesla selling those cars, you know,
Mhm.
that there, it's the difficulty factor of that is like nothing else. So it's that challenge that keeps you going too. Is
Totally. I hear what you're saying. I know sometimes I wish I just invented a widget because I feel like it would make the sales process almost like less personal for me. For me, I am a consultant and a coach, and I feel like it's so deeply personal. But what you're saying is actually it's the same for you, even
yeah,
though you're not you're selling something you made. So it's still that
it's
it's
still
still
personal, yeah, because you created it. It's like you
yeah.
create your services. It's the same
Mhm.
thing. You
Yeah.
take it personally, but that's the challenge, and there is nothing harder to do than to take that and then turn it into something lucrative out of it's a out of, like you didn't have anything when you started, did you? Nothing, right?
Did I have anything?
Yeah, I know. You just thought of this. I'm going to be this, and
Yeah, and I
you
thought, "Well,
created
I
this.
do this better than anyone else has done it."
Yeah,
Or,
see, there you go.
my unique nobody has the life experiences that I do organized in this specific way, and so I need to find a way to position myself, um, to do that, and what's worked for me is I absolutely love being with entrepreneurs, but I came to that through spending time assessing, who did I work best with, who got the best results. There's a ton of experimentation and innovation in your own processes through entrepreneurship, and that I also find incredibly motivating, just like you said. So I'm
And
right there with you.
so that's why you were able to do it. Because if you weren't motivated, you would have failed. Because you probably hit some challenges along the way where you had to get off the mat and come back the next day and hit it harder.
Big time, big time. I still have little things that I do. Like I have a quarterly kind of reflection process that I do with myself and some of my team members to look at what's working well for us. Like there's metrics we're looking at. I'm looking at customer results. I'm looking at lifetime spend, looking at where did we, how do we come to know these individuals? There's so many things that go into it that creates a successful engagement or a failed engagement, and really learning from those things too. And it's exactly what you're speaking about.
Yeah.
So help me. Let's talk. I'm curious to hear about this concept. I asked you, gosh, how do you stay motivated day after day? And you gave us some really good ideas about you got to love
Well,
your customer, you got to love what you do. But where's the opportunity? What are you seeing right now that might get you to that 5 and 10x result?
well, first of all, we're talking to people now to help finance it, right? So it takes a
Mhm.
lot of money nowadays to because early on it was like can't believe how easy it was to sell stuff. I mean, for how much it cost. You literally, we were mailing the magazines, right, where you get 7% response rate, which is crazy on your product. So you'd spend, $1,000 on mailers, and you'd make, $25,000 in like a week, right? That doesn't happen now. If you mailed that, you wouldn't even get point one of point one. It's so noisy now. You know what I mean? So there's opportunity though with the way the internet is and with social media that if you can catch fire, you can go crazy really quickly. But getting the match lit now is much harder than it was. So
Right.
back then you could get a little fire going in like, you know, 10 minutes. But the fire, there was no way to really get it to explode. Where now it's like almost impossible to get it lit, but if it does, it can go just through the roof. So we're in a totally different time now, different.
Right. Right. So you're focusing on trying to get it lit.
Yeah. Yeah. No, we can get it. Yeah. Get it lit. Is the hard part now
Right.
versus after you get it lit, it's a piece of cake. So.
Right. Right. And you're looking at social media. You're looking at how are you looking at doing that?
Yeah. Just through, advertising, social media, and using, the internet to get exposure, because everything's connected now that it
Mhm.
wasn't like that.
Right.
So this is a great time for entrepreneurs in some ways. In other ways, there's different challenges.
Yes, for sure. Different
But
challenge.
they're never going to go away. There's always going to be companies and entrepreneurs and products to be made and a better mousetrap to be had. So
Yes, that's for sure. So, what do you think are the key skills that got you to where you are today? Like, what are the skills, strategy, vision that you've had that's helped you be successful?
well, as we talked before, one thing you said is interesting. What do you think is your biggest strength as a company and your biggest weakness, right? And I'd say
Mhm.
our biggest strength is our biggest weakness. Persistence, right? Where we stay with things.
Mhm.
We won't stop until this happens. But that can kill you too. Because a lot of times you'll stay with a bad idea too
Mm.
long instead of cutting bait and moving on to the next one.
Mhm.
And so that's a really good skill as an entrepreneur and one of the worst skills you can have because you don't cut bait. You go down a market path, you're trying to sell this certain product, you've pivoted, right? And you're not getting response. No, the dogs aren't eating the dog foods per se, but you won't stop because you're the entrepreneur. It's going to work. We're going to make it work.
Right,
But, but
totally.
2 or 3 years later, you're still doing it and you're not moving the company forward. And then you bill. Whereas, like, if you'd have done that within 6 months, you could have moved on to something else and been successful much faster. So that's the entrepreneurial curse, and you get a lot of that. So
Definitely. Definitely. I hear you there. How do you guys discern that then? How do you
that's
decide?
hard. It's hard. You never know because you don't know if it's because a of lack of funding, is why you're not spending enough on marketing, or if it's the product itself, or you're marketing in the wrong place,
Mm,
right? You're talking to a group that doesn't have a fit for your products. There can be a lot of reasons. That's what makes it so difficult. You don't really know. So
so you
you get
don't
you
really know, but I bet that you're using things to try to assess.
yeah, you kind of can. Your gut feel tells you whether this is solving a solution and this will work or it won't work. So you kind of go with that.
I love that even with all these, people talk a lot about data, metrics,
Yeah,
but I love that you come back to that good old gut feeling.
yeah. You can tell, you can feel it. You can tell if you're going down the wrong road or how they're reacting to it.
Mm,
Because I mean, when we put this product out, we would look at behavior, right? We'd say, well, why are these people not, all these to-dos? You come in and we look in on this, prospect management. They got 17 to-dos they haven't touched, right? And we're looking at it and we're seeing the same problem. And we're saying, oh, it's the way it's presented and the way we positioned it within the product. So we tweaked it, and then all of a sudden that problem went away. You know what I mean? But you got to look at it and say, okay, they're not doing what they were supposed to do, and that's
mm,
when you have to you got to really ask yourself why, and then you adjust. So there's a lot of tweaking with these products based on what the consumer's telling you. You got to listen.
mhm.
It's like an art. Like you can listen, but you can't listen too much because you're supposed to be the one providing the new innovative ways for doing things. So there's a perfect kind of sweet spot you have to hit. So that's what makes it interesting.
Right, I love that. So that's the art in business or an
Yeah,
entrepreneur, that you need to listen for feedback, you
Yeah.
know, to how to drive, innovations in your product or service, how to make it better. What does the customer really want? What are they
Yeah.
responding to? But at the exact same time, staying really central to your core competencies, your
Yeah.
mission, your vision for your company, so that you don't fall too far off track, either chasing the money or letting the customers run the show, that you still have
Right.
to
Well,
be that expert.
yeah, because you're the one with all the experience in the what you're doing, right? And you're the one who's supposed to be able to tell them the expertise, but yet they have their feedback how they want you to do it. So you got to be very careful, but you have to listen to them because in
Right. So
the
it's a
end,
really delicate balance.
yeah. So that's the hard part. So that's what makes it challenging.
So I ask people who come on this show to be really willing to share stories of when things haven't gone right, or what is a vulnerability for your business, or what is a weakness. I mean, you did a really great job of describing that, how persistence shows up as both a strength and a weakness for you guys. But I'm curious, like, in the 30 years, have there been things that you guys tried and it just didn't go at all as expected, or what's something
Oh
that's
yeah.
been really excuse me, really challenging that you guys had to find a way to work through to keep your doors open?
Well, here's one like you brought back. So when we initially released the product, right? Like we said, we made the mistake where we were in too big of a hurry because we
Mm.
put this self-imposed deadline on.
Yeah, yeah.
So we released it early. So we probably got 20% back in returns in the retail channel,
Mm.
25%, which was just
That's
devastating.
huge. Yeah.
Now, if we would have waited 4 months, right, we would have had none of that and we would have been smooth sailing and a better launch. But that's because we were too, we put it's just like people going through college and stuff. They're in a big hurry to get out and do the next. It's like go to Europe for a year to enjoy yourself because when you're older, it's not going to matter. But everyone's in a hurry to get to the next spot. And we were too. We put this self-imposed. We have to get it out by then. And see, by then you'd run ads, right? And you'd have to time them. So if the product wasn't ready, all that marketing money would go away. So and you have to do it that way. See, that's the problem. So you'll spend a ton of money on these magazine ads, knowing full well you're going to be releasing it in 6 weeks. But
Mm.
guess what? Now you find out you have these huge problems.
Oh
So you
no.
have to tell yourself, do we throw away all this money we spent, or do we just try to get it out anyway? So that was one of our first errors. And the
Well,
second huge error, and we would have been retired years ago, is AOL VP brought our product in an egghead software in back in East. She fell in love with it and then wanted to use it for the address book for AOL. So we were in negotiations for 6 months. And we were too stupid to see that, okay, it's too hard for them. And they kept trying to tell us, this is a little too difficult for the average AOL user. Can you back it off, a little bit? And we're these engineer things thinking, no, it's got to be this super great, you know what I mean? Instead of just trivial, like Twitter is, right? Billion
Mhm.
dollar company. It's just 144 little
Yes.
sketches on
Yeah.
a piece of paper. You know what I mean? We were
Yeah.
just, our engineering backgrounds, killed us. Like if we would have just said, oh, they just want a trivial address book. That's a piece of cake. Boom, we would have sold our company to AOL. We would have retired 30 years ago. So, and that's true. I mean, one little move like that, if you'd have done the right thing, a whole lifetime, we would have, who knows what we'd be doing now.
Mhm. But I deeply believe in being able to carry some of those experiences forward into your next iteration, right?
Oh,
Which is
yeah.
where we are now. So what are you guys looking at? How, what is the thing that we need to do that's actually pretty basic to
That's what
help
we've done. We use that.
our
So
prospect?
that's the thing that I would say we always overestimated what the end user would tolerate as far as difficulty.
Mm.
And so we learned that lesson in this final, you know, pivot we're doing now to try to get the thing going. We learned that lesson. This thing was 6 months ago was twice as hard to use. And we said, it's still too hard, and that thing with AOL and over the years we learned it and now we're applying it. So those, like you said, those failures can be your best uh, teachers and motivators. That's part of the game.
Right.
it's just part of the, you got to like this or you don't do it. If you don't like failing and being, thrown off the cliff and getting up and crawling back up, if
Yeah,
that
what's not to like?
if that damages you, right, then you shouldn't be an entrepreneur. You got to just, you're gonna get slammed. Elon Musk, I think he probably went bankrupt 2 or 3 times. That guy, you know what I mean? He
Yeah.
faced near death with Tesla. He
Mhm.
doesn't get that loan from the government. That thing's bankrupt, and if you read these stories, all of them had those. Jeff Bezos, he even didn't sell any stock. He financed his growth with debt, right? And he almost went under, but he kept it all, and that's why he's so wealthy now. But he could have just easily sold a third of it and just
Give it
coasted.
away. Yep.
And he had a near death experience with his. So all of them, you're an inch away from losing everything or from retiring in 6 months. I mean, I've seen it. It's hard to believe.
Yeah, but it's such a really good point that these stories that we see that feel like just mega successes, it's like unfathomable amounts of money, and that it's really this delicate balance of 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 risk. Really, they're taking on so much risk. There's a lot of uncertainty, but there's a plan. There's
Yeah.
you know, there's a strategy behind
Well, well,
holding that amount.
most people don't know Starbucks was started in the 70s, right? They don't know. They think it was like this big, huge thing that blew up in the 80s and 90s. No, it's in 1970, and he was struggling, right? Barely,
Mhm,
and then he bought it from another guy, barely
mhm.
hanging on, and he had this concept of, oh, you know what? I think people want a place to go, right? And he
They
didn't
want the
sell
experience.
coffee. Yeah,
Yep.
he says we're not selling coffee anymore. We're selling this, like Cheers, where you see your friends, a community place.
Yeah.
And so he turned the Starbucks into those, and then it exploded, and now everyone thinks he's an overnight success.
Right,
Well,
or people told him to franchise, and he
yes,
decided not to.
exactly.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So yeah,
Again, you have to make some really challenging, unpopular decisions sometimes, but in order to do that well, you have to have this long-term vision. You have to
right.
have, core values and principles that your organization ascribes to in order to make those challenging decisions when there's so much emotion behind it
Oh
sometimes.
yeah, that's the hard part.
Yeah,
So
right.
that's, yeah, once again, another entrepreneurial
Well, guys,
attribute.
if we haven't if we haven't totally, blown your idea of entrepreneurial endeavors being fun and scared you away from them completely, if you are still listening, then this might be for you. I'm so grateful for you coming on, Chris, and sharing your experiences. It really is such a gift to have people who have been at this for decades. The amount of wisdom and just things you've been through is so fun to hear about. Your lived experience really comes through. So thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
How can people find you if they want to hear more about your story, learn about your products?
Oh yeah, they can visit our website, oamobile.com. That's the best place.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to make sure that that shows up when people are seeing this in the show notes, in the
Yeah,
comments below, so that people can get access to you.
yeah, and
So
yeah,
OA
we're here. Yeah, so we'd love to talk to them and see if we can help them out. So
Right. And especially this audience, this is full of entrepreneurs small business owners who are prospecting. So we'll definitely make sure that that gets to the people who are interested. Um, Again, it's been a total pleasure having you on. Thank you guys for listening. Send in your questions and comments, and I'm sure that Chris can help answer them. If you have anything else, any ideas for the show, we encourage you guys to always reach out to Brittany at BrittanyDeRose.com. We want to make sure we are covering topics that you guys find helpful. Until the next time, guys, keep learning, keep staying out there, trying your best, letting failures happen, innovating, and staying motivated to the process.
yeah, it's all the process.
It's all
If
the
you don't
process.
enjoy the process, you're not going to be, because when you do arrive, whatever that is, right, you're going to
Yeah.
look around and you're going to and say, this is it. This is what no, so you have to enjoy the journey.
That's right.